Thank you so much for being here, and feel free. It's very casual, so feel free to continue eating lunch or get lunch out, whatever you need during this time of day. We're excited to kick off. I guess our lead-up batter is Dr. Karen Cleveland for the summer series, and a little bit of personal bio. She grew up in Ogden, Iowa, is the oldest of three in a competitive sports-loving family.
Loving, not playing.
Loving, not playing. Her mom is a tech specialist, imagine that, for Heartland Area Education Agency in Johnston. And her dad doesn't know how to turn on a computer. Her mom hates that she's the only one in the family who refuses to get an iPhone. Android forever, she says, because she can't name the family group chat. Her dad learned to text and tweet a few years ago and is actually a pretty savvy smartphone user. She's lived in Pella more or less since 1999, with brief stops in Pasadena and Grand Rapids, Michigan. She is currently a licensed clinical psychologist and a visiting lecturer at Central College. And this summer, you might see her uptown and around, maybe walking or jogging, with her snorky Hank, who will probably be begging for a pup comb from the scoop several times this summer. She's been a regular tender here at Third Church since 1998 and finally became a member in 2008. She writes the reason why she chose this topic for summer series: she loves gadgets. She has noticed a significant impact, both in positive and in negative ways, that they have on all aspects of life and in the lives of friends, families, and clients. She's come to realize that in order to stay healthy physically, emotionally, relationally, and spiritually, it is important to have boundaries around the use of technology. The issue is especially important for young adults and adolescents who have never known life without social media or a smartphone. Her passion for that group of people is for helping them to be healthy, especially in emotional and relational ways. This led to a passion for educating people on the impact technology has on our lives and how to use it in healthy, God-honoring ways. The summer series welcomes Dr. Karen Cleveland. Can you give her a round of applause?
Thank you guys for coming. I do have about 5 hours of material, so I hope you all took vacation this afternoon. You did, right? They told you to do that? So here's my first question. What's your relationship with technology? Does your phone go everywhere you go? I left my phone at home on Sunday morning. I drove to Newton, where my friend Marcy was preaching. And even though she was getting ready to preach, the first thing I told her when I got to church was, I need to borrow your phone. I was lost without it. And so what you need to know as I dive into this is that I do love gadgets, and I do love technology. I am not a technology hater by any means. In fact, I think God's given me a purpose in this area because it's a struggle of my own. And so what is your relationship with technology? How do you feel when your phone isn't with you? And are you receiving more enjoyment from your gadgets than from real life conversations? What we want to do today is find a way to live out what Kevin's been talking about in the sanctuary for the last 9 weeks or so. That we have to be about seeking God's kingdom first and only. And if our technology is getting in the way of that, then we have a problem. So our technology needs to facilitate this, not get in the way of this. So really, underneath those first questions is this question: what are you seeking? Are you seeking fulfillment from technology, or are you using technology as a tool to help you seek the kingdom? So that's hopefully where we're going to go in about 50 minutes, and I'm sure I'll answer all of your questions, and you'll have none left, and we'll be technology specialists, right? So here's the stakes. Whose family looks like this? The baby. So true confessions, mine does. I go home to visit, and I've got my group of young adults right here. I love them. These are my people, even though I'm not actually one of them. And I was talking to some of these guys on Sunday and on Thursday night about this topic of technology, and I said, who's worse at staring at their phone in your family? Do you know what they all told me? Parents. It's actually not this generation. We blame them, but if you have a conversation with them, they will actually look you in the eye. Guess who won't? My parents. I go home to visit, which isn't often. I go home and visit, and my mom has her laptop, and my dad, he's so cute. He's got his little iPhone and his bifocals, and he's doing this. And he won't look up. It's the cutest thing, if it wasn't annoying, because I would actually have to have a conversation with him. And then, to make matters even worse, we're watching something on TV, probably ESPN, because that's the only channel that works in our family, that or Fox News, and when I go home, we have to make sure it's ESPN, because the yelling, just too much. But we're probably watching ESPN, or we're talking or something, and then he's playing videos on his phone over all the other stuff. And my mom is editing stuff for church on her computer, and it's just too much stimulation. And so we're all disconnected, but in the same room, right? And this has kind of become the picture of what technology has done. But I want to try to reframe that, because this is where we've been, right? And this is true. Actually, studies are starting to show that there's a difference between what a screen does to your attention than what, say, a book does. And I can tell you, this is going to sound weird, but trust me, my dog can tell the difference. I can sit and read a book, and he will lay by me perfectly content. But the minute my screen comes out, he is agitated. And you can ask anybody who I talk to on the phone regularly, he can be perfectly content. The minute I'm on the phone, he's barking and yipping, he can feel the disconnect. So if a dog can, how much can a kid? So we've got these doomsday people out there, and remember I said I don't hate technology. This is another one that went viral. So Rembrandt, all these kids sitting in front of one of the most famous paintings in all of the world, right? And these kids just got hammered on social media for this. But we need to be cautious, because here's the same kids. See the difference? They're using an app designed by the museum that gives them the history on the painting. And they were actually instructed by the teacher to look up the history of the painting. And this was moments before with the other painting. So we've got this contrast. See, technology is not good or bad, it's how we use it. Are we using it to seek the kingdom, or is it controlling our lives? Do you own your smartphone, or does your smartphone own you? So let me give you some digital breakdowns just so you kind of have some orientation. I'm much closer to this top set of people than I'd probably like to be. I did have email and chat rooms in high school, but they were that annoying dial-up noise. Y'all remember? You all don't remember that, but some of us seem to remember that. And so we are immigrants. I learned to type on a very basic word processor, and actually my mother, who before she was a tech specialist was an administrative assistant, made sure that all of her children knew how to type on a good old typewriter, and she still gets mad if she sees me doing anything that is not perfectly correct when I'm typing. So I'm an immigrant to the actual digital age, right? Didn't write most of my papers on computers in high school. Did in college, but not most of them in high school. You had to write them out, and then you'd go into the library and you type them out on a computer, right? Or if you were me, because at that time your mom was the high school secretary, you'd say, Mom, I need you to type this by third period. Don't tell my principal. That really happened, unfortunately. 25-year-olds had MySpace in high school, so they were ahead as far as this digital stuff goes. So they're bilingual. They know how to do the social media stuff, and they know how to live without it, because they're on that edge more than the 30-year-olds were. And the 15-year-olds that show up in my office have no clue what life is like without these things. So they have a native tongue in this digital world. And this is huge. It is affecting so many things, and I'm going to run out of time to tell you about all of them. But if you want to talk about them more, I will gladly stick around. One of the major things it's impacting is their social skill development, actually. Brain development and social skill development. We'll talk about that a little bit. But for an example, I want to give you popularity then and now. When I was in high school, you had a sense of who was popular and who wasn't, right? And I know this is going to be shocking, but I was like a major nerd in high school. It wasn't the coolness that you see now. So, major nerd. And so you could find me on most Friday nights, honestly, reading, because that's what I did. And honestly, I was fine with that. And And being somewhat self-deprecating, it was all really, really good. But I missed a lot of parties and I was okay with that. It just wasn't my scene. But I never had to see it, right? I'd show up on Monday and I would hear about it, but I never had to see it. And I definitely didn't have to see it in live time. What happens now? If a kid gets excluded, isn't invited, they don't hear about it on the back end on Monday. They watch it unfold over Instagram and Snapchat and sometimes Facebook, although teenagers now are not using Facebook as much as those other two platforms. So they watch it unfold in live time. And they can see what they're missing out on. And it's a whole different deal. When it comes to popularity, you sort of knew where you fit in, but there was no concrete way to put, there's no way to quantify it, right? It was just a vague sense. Well, now it's quantifiable. You know how it's quantifiable? Likes. And the kids notice. Likes and followers. Jane has 50 followers, and I have 75, and Susie has 25. So right there, I know exactly where I fall in my peer group. And it can be incredibly hurtful if that's where teenagers are finding their source of identity, and unfortunately, that's where a lot of them are. So just an example, this has changed things big time. Okay, just one example. And arguably, the most awkward time in their lives, a crucial time of development when they are trying to figure out who they are and where they belong, this is what they're up against, quantifiable popularity rankings. Just think about what that would have done if you were in high school. Now, this is another shocker, I think. What happens is science creates something that becomes technology. Science allows us to create a technology. And then we start to use that technology. And then the problem is we don't know what that technology does to us, so we then need science to try to catch up to where the technology has taken us. And what we're learning is that we do not know enough about screen time and what it's doing to us. And the science is just now starting to catch up, and I'm going to geek out on you a little bit and give you some of the background of that. For screen time, here are the recommended amounts per age group. So notice 0 to 2, no screen time. They need face-to-face, absolutely have to have face-to-face. Most are spending on average 4.5 hours. That's over 40% of their waking time. 3 to 5, 1 hour a day. They need make-believe. Again, they're up closer to 4.5, 5 hours. 6 to 12-year-olds, 90 minutes a day. Now 12 is when they're gonna get their first gadget in school, at least in this community. 13 to 18, 2 hours a day. That's where they have their laptops in school. And when I've talked to administrators at the school, they're using their laptops in school around 70% of the day. So during the school day, the 8-hour school day, they're using it 70% of the time. That's way exceeding the 2 hours a day. And what do you think they do when they go home? Especially until mom and dad get home. So we've got most kids spending on average, so some are more, 8 hours a day on their screens. And the recommendation is 2. We're naive if we think that's not changing us somehow, okay? So I want to tell you why Mr. Rogers is smarter than baby Einstein. And I wish I could take credit for this. This comes from Josh Straub, S-T-R-A-U-B. And I would urge you to look up his blog. He has a curriculum even, tech-savvy parenting stuff, and I can give you the actual name of the curriculum because it's escaping me right now. But his stuff is very, very good. He's a psychologist that started to look into this when he had kids himself. And this is also, if you're into TED Talks, you can find this information on a TED Talk, and I'll give that on my website. So if you are interested in this, you can go to my website. The cards are on your table, and you can find all this information there, all the resources and references. So there's a hypothesis called the overstimulation hypothesis. I will make this simple, I promise. Basically, we get overstimulated. Too much info. Too much info too quickly. And when that happens, we start to decrease our attention span. So what happens is there's a number of screen changes creates this overstimulation, okay? Who here remembers, please? Mr. Rogers. Okay, good. Now, who's seen a baby Einstein? I honestly have not. Okay, so a lot of you have. Now, here's the reason why Mr. Rogers is smarter. Baby Einstein has a screen change one time every 3 seconds. Okay? So if you look at Baby Einstein's A Day at the Farm, in a 20-second clip, the screen changes 7 times. Now, we live in Iowa. I'm hoping that most of you have been to a real farm. Does the scenery change every 3 seconds on a real farm? So what happens when you take a 3 or 4 or 5-year-old to a real life farm? They should be what? They should be excited. They should be exploring. They should think it's awesome. What's happening nowadays? They're bored. They're bored. So if you compare Baby Einstein and Mr. Rogers, how many screen changes does Mr. Rogers have? Y'all watched Mr. Rogers lately? I pulled up a YouTube. I don't know why I liked it when I was 3. It is boring. I mean, he's sweet, and the sweater, and the make-believe land, and all of that, but you know what he does that's brilliant? He looks right in the screen, and it moves so methodically and so slowly. The clip I watched was about going to a restaurant. Oh, it's really busy today. Oh, it sure sounds like it, Mr. Rogers, because you're so slow. And let me find you a seat. And here's a fork. And, oh, it's slow. But what's it teaching? Eye contact, even through a screen. Conversation, even through a screen. And the screen doesn't actually ever change. The camera follows him. And so there's 0 screen changes. Now, what has this done? In 1970, guess what the first exposure to a screen was, average age? Average age that a child first saw a screen, 1970. Oh, I heard a number. Say it louder. 5? Very, very close. Average was 4 years old. Guess what it is today?
5 minutes.
4 months is the average. So what's that done? Here's what that's done. For every hour of increased TV watched per day, there's a 10% increase in the probability of inattention problems by age 7. Now, why is 7 important? 0 to 2 is when the brain explodes. Now, what explodes is not necessarily the weight, it's the number of connections. And then that doubles and triples even by age 7, and by 15, we start to prune back a little bit. And so when we have these quick changes that are overstimulating things, our brain can't grow properly and develop the deep grooves it needs. Because we want depth. For every hour of cognitive stimulation, you have a 30% decrease in possible attention problems. Now, do not go out there and say, Dr. Cleveland says that Baby Einstein causes ADHD. I will not be happy with you. Correlation is not causation. I've got some college students in here, I won't point them out, but they ought to know, because I hammer it, causation is not the same as correlation. Something can be correlated, that doesn't mean that they're causing each other. So more research is needed here. But I will tell you that in 2003, our ADHD prevalence rates were around 7%. In 2007, they were about 9%. And in 2011, which is the earliest the most recent we've got, because it takes a while to get prevalence rates, they're at 11. And some people say, well, they're overdiagnosing, right? No. I'm one of the people who diagnoses. Believe me, we don't like to diagnose it if we don't have to. It's probably being undertreated, if anything. And this is not saying it causes ADHD, it's causing inattention problems. So inattention problems and ADHD are also not the same thing, okay? But we have to understand that this is causing brain changes. One of the things I've noticed, so I told you about geeking out in high school and reading. I don't know about you, but my brain has changed even. I can feel it. And I didn't have the digital stimulation in my developmental years that they have now. I get impatient when I'm reading a book. And that used to never happen. After a page or two, I'm like, when's the chapter break for the love? Right? And what we're noticing is that this generation, not to pick on you all, but they don't read left to right like most of us. Guess what they do? They scan in L's. Why would you do that? Even on a book, they scan in L's. That's what a computer screen has taught us to do. And so they scan a page instead of actually reading the content. In fact, a Rhodes Scholar from Florida State said, I don't even read anymore. Reading books is silly because I can get all the information I need from a Google search. Rhodes Scholar, not a dummy here, guys. So this is changing the way we read. Nicholas Carr wrote The Shallows and The Glass Cage about how this is shaping us, and that's what he noticed. Here's a literary major, communication major, knows that he can't read like he used to. I'm noticing it. I don't think Nicholas and I are probably alone. What's happened when those connections don't develop, or when we start to shortchange them with technology, is the depth of our thinking is affected because the gray matter and white matter ratio starts to change. Fancy stuff that I can tell you about later if you want. And so I notice it with my college students. And I am a loved and hated professor because of it, because darn it, they're going to leave my classroom having learned, hopefully, how to think a little deeper than they came in, because they want answers. Why? Not because they're lazy. I promise you, this generation is not lazy. They're not. They get a bad rap of being entitled and lazy, and it's not true. If you think that, you have not been around 20-year-olds. What they do have, though, is a lack of development in the cortex that they need to think deeply. And technology is doing it to them. And someone has to teach them how to do that. How do I synthesize information? How do I form my own opinion? All of that is a loss of gray matter in the brain that is allowing us, that gray matter allows us to actually think critically, to think deeply. Technology is shortchanging that. Technology is shortchanging our ability to learn because we're so over-fatigued by what's assaulting us. It's affecting our memory. How many people remember phone numbers anymore? In fact, it's kind of creepy now if you do. Like, why do you have my phone number memorized? That's weird. It used to be normal, right? Okay. Our cortisol has increased because of all the overstimulation, so we're more anxious. And our pleasure system is shot because we don't ever gear down. And if we don't gear down and learn how to be bored, we can't then find joy in the little things anymore. Okay? But it's not just brain changes. Sleep. Oh my goodness. The number of teenagers I have, and their parents, unfortunately, encourage this for some reason. Why are you sleeping with your phone next to your bed? And this is the answer I get every single time. What's my alarm clock? They sell alarm clocks at Walmart, people. They're like $5. Like, turn the phone off and go buy an alarm clock. Well, if the power goes out? For one thing, when was the last time the power went out? Like, it seemed to happen all the time when I was little, but really, when was the last time the power went out? Secondly, there's these things called batteries. Yeah. And you put it in the alarm clock, and if the power does go out, plus, when was the last time a 16-year-old got themselves up? Like, don't they normally need their mom still to be like, get up, you're going to be late for school? Or was that just me? Okay. So get an alarm clock, because the beeps and the dings and all of them. And in full disclosure, you're talking to someone who has their phone right by her ear. And some of you might be in that situation. Mine's there because I'm on call. So what do? This can be very tricky if you've got a job that requires that you have your phone with you. Okay? And the social communication skills. I've already talked about this a little bit, but there is a disconnect that's happening that is very concerning to me. Kids are not mean. They lack emotional development. So if I wanted to be mean to Sunny when I was in high school, I had to do it to her face or behind her back, but it had to happen IRL, in real life, right? And when I did that in real life, guess what I also had to deal with? Her reaction. And the reaction of her friends in real life. What about now? Now it can happen virtually. And now I don't have to see how hurt she is when I don't invite her. I don't have to see how hurt she is when I say something bad about her. And it shortchanges the ability for the emotional development to take place, and especially when it comes to empathy. So these kids lack empathy, not because they're bad kids, but because they're not having the face-to-face conversations and interactions required to develop it. So what happens is technology gives us the illusion of companionship without the demands of friendship, because friendship's hard. And then if we go further, it gives us the illusion of friendship without the demands of intimacy, because that's even harder. So we have a very lonely generation that we're raising right now. Okay? All right, where are we at? How are we doing? Okay? So what does it look like to have a healthy relationship with technology? Honest question, what does this look like? What do we do? It's not going away, right?
I guess we have to learn boundaries. We have to figure out when is a healthy time to be accessing or to have it, like we're calling right now.
Joe and I worked that out beforehand. So that was all planned. That is awesome.
Marriott Hotels has an exclusive event.
Good. That's excellent. I love it.
Yes, when do I turn it on?
Boundaries, right? Boundaries are hard. We will talk about boundaries. Here's one of the ways I think you can at least evaluate if you have a healthy relationship or not, and you all are not going to like me, but you have to blame Diane Langberg because it's her quote, not mine. Anything you cannot fast from owns you. So really, when was the last time you were without your phone for a day? Because if you cannot fast from it, it has supplanted God's place in your heart. I know, mood killer. So when was the last time that you turned off the television? Honestly, that's harder for me than my phone. When was the last time you went without your computer or the internet or Facebook or email? There's a great TED Talk by a guy who actually started a tech magazine, and then about 6 months after starting this tech magazine, he decided he'd go without the internet for a year. How hilarious is that? When he was done, he had 20,000 emails. Can you imagine? It's a great TED Talk. If you want to look it up, I'll give you the name later. He talks about his year without the internet, especially being someone who writes for a tech magazine. Here's the deal. You say I'm allowed to do anything, but not everything is good for you. And even though I'm allowed to do anything, I must not become a slave to anything. Paul was smart. We need to have an understanding that all that's been created, whether by man's hands because of the brains God gave us, or nature, is for us to use for God's glory and not to own us. It comes back to what you see. So, we're going to start down. I'm actually doing okay on time, so this is pretty amazing because normally I talk way too long. We're going to start to turn a corner towards what do we actually do about this. So before we do that, any questions about, I threw a lot of science at you. Are we good? Any questions?
I'm just curious who Diane Langberg is.
Diane Langberg is a Christian psychologist. Yep. And I will put these slides on my website, so you can get those from my website as well.
I just have a question.
Yeah.
I read that the people that created Google and those companies send their children to Waldorf schools.
Waldorf schools,
no
yes.
technology.
There's 160 of them nationwide, and it's true. They started in Silicon Valley, and they're high schools, and actually I think they even have elementary and middle schools where they have no technology, no calculators, nothing.
Just paper and pencil.
Paper, pencil, and they don't even have whiteboards. They've got chalkboards.
And that's the people who created.
That's the people who created technology. They do not allow their kids to have technology during the school day. And everything is hands-on. So when they do their different subjects, they are literally hands-on learning. It is not even the kind of school that I would have gone to where there just wasn't computers and they were doing other things. They are actually solving problems in creative, hands-on ways. They actually do, again, you can YouTube and find videos on this, so you can use technology to learn about how not to use technology. Isn't that great? So you can, and so they'll do a lot of sculpting and a lot of 3D things, even in their math and in their science, and in order to engage with the material. And we'll talk about how that's one of the things that we need to start to do to combat some of this. Okay? Any other questions? Good. Yeah, Waldorf schools. Yeah.
Yeah, I think you're into it, but
I'm definitely a digital immigrant. I'm above that 35 of the age ranges, and I feel so ill-equipped. You know, I don't know. So this weekend, my daughter's Instagram account got hacked, and it's just one of those things where I'm like, I don't even have a clue what is proper, you know, digital citizenship. What is, you know, all of those things. It's just hard to navigate with.
Right.
Yeah.
And I'm not gonna dive into the parenting piece a lot unless you guys ask me questions at the end, which I'm gonna leave a good 10 minutes for questions. So those of you who need to get back to work by 1 can do that. And those of you who just have questions, I'll end about 10 till. So I'm not gonna address a ton of parenting stuff unless you ask me later. But that's one of the things I hear from parents is, I don't know what to do. At the risk of making you mad at me, that's not a reason to do nothing. You can't say that, ignorance is an excuse. At least it never was for me. I couldn't say, well, Mom, I got a speeding ticket, I didn't know the speed limit. Like, they didn't seem to care. It was like, you shouldn't have been going that fast. And the cop didn't seem to care either. So ignorance is not an excuse to do nothing. And I know that when you start to have kids be ahead of you and it doesn't take much, that it's terrifying. What do you do? For grandparents who have grandkids and they're like, what do you do? And it's really great when they can fix your cable for you, but it's really bad when you find them in places on the internet they're not supposed to be. And the reality is, this is one area of parenting we probably have to be much more reactive than proactive, but we can't ignore the proactivity either. We gotta do what we can, knowing they're gonna get around it, and then engage with them on how to kind of get it on the back end. Am I getting it there? Christy's the expert on this. Am I hitting it?
The expert.
Yeah, well. Actually, I hope they did a whole class on this. I hope you guys offer it again, because it was really good. That's more practical on this whole parenting piece, because it's hard when you feel like it's not your native language and it is theirs. But I can give you some of those tips later. Anything else? Good questions. Okay, so here's the deal. Technology makes us feel like we need more and more and more. Consumerism in general does that to us, right? We need. What's the latest platform? What's the latest gadget? I need to have it, right? The lines for the new iPhones crack me up, because again, I'm an Android user, what do I know? But like, why are we lining up around the block for an iPhone that's exactly the same, just has a bigger screen? But it happens, right? And maybe I just don't get the whole Apple thing, but I think it's actually more to do with just we need to have the latest, faster, better. Why? What are we looking for? What do we think it's going to give us? Because the reality is, even though we feel like we need more, deep down what we really need is less. Instead of more amusement and entertainment, we actually need more musing and imagination. Instead of entertainment, we need to be creating. We need less sitting, more moving. Unless it's 95 degrees out, then it is perfectly okay to sit, in my opinion. We need less multitasking, more focus. Multitasking, by the way, is a myth. You cannot do it. It is physically, neurologically impossible to multitask. Moms, you too. You cannot multitask. You can switch tasks, but you cannot multitask. And that's why distracted driving ends up with accidents, because you can't switch fast enough. And when you constantly are switching tasks, you become incredibly inefficient. So the most productive way to approach a task is to complete it start to finish. But what happens when we're at work? We start a task, and then ding, and so we go check the email. And then I'm thirsty, so I go get something to drink. And then beep, Facebook, and so we're constantly switching. And at the end of the hour, we wonder why in the world we didn't get anything done. Because we're constantly switching. And every time you switch, you got to get caught back up to whatever place you stopped. And so if you want to be efficient, start to end. Because there really is no such thing as multitasking. We need a lot less watching and a lot more reading. If you take anything away as far as practically what to do, read. And don't tell me I don't like to read. You don't like to read because you haven't done it. And whoever said that we always do things that we like anyway. I don't like to run, I still do it. Badly, but I do it. Slowly, but I do it. So if you see me walking, in my head, I'm running. I wish that were a joke. It's really true. We need less texting. We need more talking. We got to get face to face. We absolutely have to get face to face. It's the only way to solve some of the social issues that we're seeing. So for grandparents and parents in here, get your kids face to face. You have to. Get them with their peers face to face. When they're at your house, make all of them turn in their cell phone. Make them be face to face. Make them figure out how to do that. And no, it's gonna be rough at first. They won't know how.
I have one point to make. Some of my kids are in their early 20s, and they tell me that they are figuring this out. And so, like, by themselves, it doesn't take Chick-fil-A or something to put a basket in front of them. But, you know, I had a 20-year-old tell me, well, when we go out, we put our phones in the middle of whoever looks first has to pay the bill. You know, so they are figuring it out. You know, they're starting. Because when I look at that, I get overwhelmed, like, well, how do I make my kids want that? But then I realize I can't, but they're starting to figure it out.
I'm getting there. Less comfort, more adventure. Less screen time, more outdoor time. Less apathy, more passion. Less self-centeredness, more serving. We need less of me and more of God. We need to understand that we have to have boundaries around these things. If we don't, it will start to own us. Is this making sense? So what can we do? Have candid, thoughtful, caring conversations. There needs to be 3 conversations that go on. We need to actually have conversations with ourselves. We have to have conversations with others. We have to have conversations with God. This does not happen quickly. This does not happen, I would argue, over electronics. This happens slowly over coffee. This happens on back porches. This happens on car rides. This happens on walks. This happens late at night when you should be in bed. This happens early in the morning. To develop empathy, we have to have face-to-face. And I would argue we have to be serving other people. I just sent, 55 8th graders, incoming freshmen, off to Chicago. We have to keep doing that. And we have to have parents be okay with them not having their phones when they're there. Because last time I checked, I didn't have one at that age. And I survived. Like, I'm still alive. And I don't recall there being a lot of deaths by lack of cell phone. Yeah.
So do you feel there's a fear?
Oh, so
huge.
huge.
This, and that's why just a lot of fear.
As much as teens fight me when I've had a drawer full of cell phones in my office before, because I'll just take them away. If the parent's unable to take it away, I'll take it away. It's just in my desk until their appointment the next week. Because parents can't do it. Parents cannot do it. They're so afraid. Why won't we be able to get a hold of them? And I had a 16-year-old ask me honestly, Karen, when you were 16, like, what did you do when you got a flat tire or your car broke down? It was an honest question. You sat there until someone stopped? What if they were a bad person? Bad people don't typically stop. And you just were smart. You rolled your window down this much and said, could you call the cops? Well, they didn't have a cell phone either, right? No. So what'd they do? Well, they drove to the next town and they used this thing called a payphone. It was an honest question. She had no idea what she would do if she didn't have a phone. Why are we not equipping kids with what to do without their phone? And why are we as parents afraid to equip them to not have a phone? It's a ton of fear. So we have to help them develop empathy, and we have to stop being afraid. Have to stop being afraid. We have to remind ourselves that we survived childhood. We need to tell more I walked uphill both ways in the snow stories. We really do. Okay? I mean, y'all, I didn't have my first cell phone until college, and you couldn't use it because it was so stinking expensive. Like, it was okay. It was okay. My mom still sent me back to school saying, as she still does to this day, watch for deer. Yes, Mom. It doesn't matter what time of day or time of year, watch for deer. And call me when you get there. Because when I got there, guess what? There was some sort of phone. I didn't need myself. I didn't have to be on the phone with her the whole way. Right? But heaven forbid if I forgot to call her. Oh, goodness. Cultivate your inner life through silence and solitude. I listed some scriptures, and I won't read all of them. But all of them speak to silence. We just cannot do this technology piece well in the busyness and in the noise. And is there anything noisier than technology, really? Even if it's not audibly loud. Have you guys looked at how much people fit on a screen? Even this one? The ads that accost you, the pop-ups, the stimulation, it's just overwhelming, right? And if we don't disconnect and slow down, we just rev and rev and rev. And then all of those brain changes are reinforced. So in order to fix this, we have to fight that. And we have to slow down, we have to disconnect. Okay? We have to get into nature, honestly. And for those of you who know me, it's hilarious to hear me say that because I am not outdoorsy. And that's putting it mildly. I love the air conditioning, and roughing it to me is no remote control. But we have to get out in nature. That's where we find God, right? You have to. Have the silence, you have to get by yourself. Even Jesus did that. He pulled away from the noise of his day. It wasn't a cell phone, but it was crowds. He pulled away. We have to limit selfies. The one social media platform I will not jump on. We'll see if I can stick to this because you should never say never. But Snapchat, I don't understand. I don't get it. Why do you need my mugshot with a 140 character saying? I don't get it. I have gotten better at selfies. I didn't bring my selfie stick. Normally I bring selfie sticks, and on my own media platform with Mind Games, we'll put selfies of all of the people I talk to. I didn't bring it today. If you want, we can try to do it the old school way after we're done. But I don't get the whole selfie thing, but it's there, right? I don't get how selfies edify God or the kingdom. But if you find a reason to take a selfie, maybe just limit them and find ways that you can use them that are positive. Okay? And can I urge us all, and this is for the adults too, because I actually think adults violate this more than teens, honestly. Can we think twice and post once? The politics, I'm floored in the aftermath of this Orlando shooting that we're not just saddened by what happened. Why does this have to be a moment to make a political stance? What does their sexuality have to do with the fact that they were killed? I don't have to agree with their lifestyle to still be sad that they're now mowed down by a terrorist. And why do and even if I feel that way, why do I need to put that on social media? So we have to be aware of how we use social media. Now, I'm not saying I use social media in a God-honoring way because I really don't know. I posted this morning about my dog. I don't really know how that edifies the kingdom either. But I also don't think it tears anybody down. So at least it's neutral, right? Like, so if you want to go on my Facebook and see what Hank's up to, feel free. This morning he was bringing toys to bed. That's what he was doing. So I don't know how that advances the kingdom, but at the very least, let's make sure we're not tearing it down. Okay? And so we need to play together. We need to actually get face-to-face and play together. We've lost that. Again, we need to probably tell some, back in the day I played kick the can and it was great. And we need to get back to some of those simple things and learn that simple is not necessarily the same as boring, and start to engage in some of those simpler things and find joy again in those simple things. Guard your heart, which will spring of life. If you find yourself sucked in to posts and pictures and content that is not edifying. No one can guard your heart for you but you. You can ask for accountability, but the reality is, it's still ultimately you with the power of the Holy Spirit in charge of guarding your heart. And that means you might have to shut stuff down. You might have to get some blockers for yourself. And that's what makes parenting teenagers with this so scary, because they don't actually have the frontal lobe to do that. I have more sexting cases in my office right now than I even know what to do with. And when they first come in, they hate me because I hammer them hard. I am the meanest person they've ever met. Because it appears as if I have no empathy for what they've done. And the reason I'm so harsh on them is because what I've experienced with our teenagers is that they don't get what they've done. And the reason that they don't get what they've done is very simple. They don't have the brain capacity to understand it. So I'm trying to force that development in a hurry by making them cry, honestly. So that's what I do, make them cry. There's a reason on internship I was nicknamed Dr. Snot. So I get people to cry if I need to. It's not always the goal, but I need them to connect with that emotional piece. Even if they don't understand it, I need them to feel it. And sometimes that's just by making them mad. Because that's how they're going to get their frontal lobe, which is in the front, is where our decision making is. And it genuinely does not develop until 25. So we wonder why we have problems when we give a 16-year-old a car. And it's actually developing more slowly than it used to. Over the last 20 years, development of that part of the brain has slowed dramatically. And so we really probably shouldn't give people licenses until they're 18, 19, 20. Now, good luck getting that legislature passed.
Why is it slowing? Yeah, why?
Again, correlation is not causation. We don't know.
What's your theory? Yeah, but what's your theory?
The theory is technology, I think.
It changes a lot of your attention span. I mean, it totally changes and it decreases, and that just affects the brain.
I think it's true. I think if you ask teachers, you ask principals, they'll tell you that they've seen a difference in what happens. Most 11, 12-year-olds on the playground are functioning emotionally around 7 or 8. Why? What's changed? It's technology. The other thing that I do believe has changed, and this is a different topic altogether, but I think there's also, and technology maybe has driven some of this too, but there are differences now in our adult-child relationships that used to not be there 20 or 30 years ago. There's, Chap Clark would call it a systematic abandonment of adults, of our kids. So we've left kids to fend for themselves, and when they fend for themselves, they can't develop the way they need to. Okay. And then we try to correct that by hovering, which just made things worse. So that frontal lobe hasn't developed, and so they don't understand what they've done. And now their heart's not guarded because of a picture they sent, right? And now we're trying to figure out what in the world to do with that, and the damage is done. The kids I've got in my office, the incidents happened back in the fall, and they're still experiencing the fallout. Yesterday in my office, just weeping. Nothing she can do. It's done. It's absolutely done. And so now it's about how do we heal the shame? How do we heal the regret? How do we deal with all the consequences that cannot be undone? How do we get her back whole? And one of the things I did in order to get her to wake up, because she was very clueless about what had happened. So I did that. And then I asked her if the paper was better or worse than before I ripped it. Pretty obvious, right? And then I took Scotch tape and taped it back together. And I said, is it whole? And she said, kinda. That's what she's done. I mean, thankfully, God's a lot better at putting things back together than I am. But she's still going to have forever consequences that are there because of a decision she made at 15 that she really didn't have the capacity to even make. And that's what makes technology so scary, is it deletes the pause button. So to get really frank, when I was 15, if I wanted to show somebody myself, I had to actually be with them in person and make the decision to take clothes off. there was a natural pause button. That's gone. That makes sense? And honestly, unfortunately, some adults are not leading the way in that. But I love what my brother said about sexting specifically, because he's 24, so he's kind of right in there. I said, what do you think about all this stuff? He goes, it always seemed like high risk, low reward to me. True, right? True. And then we need to seek God's kingdom. It's going to come right back around to that. Are we seeking God's kingdom first and only, or not? It is 10 till I promised, it's more like 8 till I promised I would stop. So I'll stop. What question do you have? There's a couple more slides if we want to, but.
Is there any research how the U.S. culture against other cultures?
There is, I didn't look it up. They do see a difference. And actually Asia is worse right now. Asia actually, they're, one piece I can tell you is that in South Korea specifically, they've noticed that 20-year-olds are actually having the effects of dementia. And so they've had to pull those kids out of school and actually put them in nursing home type settings to get their brain to heal because it's been so damaged by technology use.
And it's addiction to video games.
Right.
Is predominant.
Right.
Well, don't they have camps too? They have like boot camps kind of that they train them to get
To-
used to that
yeah.
kind of technology.
So Asia's in a worse place than we are right now. Parts of Asia. Yes. Yes.
Why do you think parents, like for a kid to say, well, my parent uses it more than I do, why do you think a parent would more?
I think they're enamored with it because it's
Yeah.
new.
Okay.
And they're distracted, just like their kids.
Yeah.
They don't realize that it's been 20 minutes, they think it's been 5.
And that's what happens. A 5-minute turns into 20, happens to me all the time. You go to watch a YouTube video, and that YouTube video leads to another YouTube video, and all of a sudden it's an hour later, you're like, what in the world just happened? Yeah.
Are there certain personalities that are more apt to feel the need to have certain things available all
I
the
think
time?
there are.
Like people who call each other constantly.
I think you see that in anything where, if you've got kind of an addictive personality, but it's not even necessarily, we always call that addictive personality, but I think there are just people who are more drawn to technology. And if you talk to someone who's got more than one kid, they'll tell you that this child needs really hardly any boundaries on their technology, and this kid needs all kinds because they're just enamored with it. And so notice I haven't given you any blanket, well, do this, don't do that, because it's such an individual thing. And one of the things we have to do is know our digital ABCs. We have to have an agreement with people in our lives of how we're going to handle our technology. And there's some digital agreements on my website. We have to have boundaries around it that exceed those contracts or those agreements. And we have to have consequences when we break it. Even if those are self-imposed. Like, you know what, I've been on it too much, I need to put it away. So there ought to be a family digital agreement, and every person needs to have their own individual. What do I mean by agreement? I'm not going to check my phone until 9 o'clock, and I'm not going to check it after 9 o'clock. I'm going to create boundaries. I promise my family I'm not going to check my phone at the dinner table. I promise I will not use social media until we've played together as a family. Whatever those need to be for you. But they have to be for you because some of us do have jobs where I have to have my phone on my hip. So how am I going to do that in the midst of